Welcome to number 4 in our series of webinars brought to you by World ParaVolley. Wherever you're watching around the world, thank you for joining us. Just a reminder, before we get underway, can you please make sure that your microphone is muted? I've heard a few bleed through there. We've got an absolutely wonderful guest speaker today, and we want to make sure that we can hear her. If there is something that you want to ask or want to say later, there will be the opportunity to unmute and have a conversation. But if you can wait until then, it would be greatly appreciated. This is webinar number 4. A reminder that all the webinars are recorded, and webinar 1, Growing the Game with Matt and John, webinar 2, Coaching People with Different Disabilities with Ivan Kosic, and webinar number 3, Using the Bench to Improve Performance with Paralympic medal-winning coach Nicole Band. They're all currently available. Today's guest is Taylor Gabler. She is a certified mental performance consultant. She's been working in volleyball and working in adaptive sport for over half a decade. And I hope I can speak on behalf of everyone when I say I am really looking forward to this today. So Taylor, you're here. I can see you. Hopefully I can hear you. How are you? Where are you in the world? And the floor is yours.
Yeah, I am doing well. I am in Fort Wayne, Indiana in the United States, and I'm excited to be here and to have a conversation after, I get done yip-yapping about all of these things. I am going to share my screen and make sure that everyone can see what they need to see, which is not that one. Just give me a second. I don't know why it's doing this. You know what? We're just going to do it. All right. Is everyone seeing my slides and seeing me click through?
Yes, we are.
Perfect. We will go then. So as he mentioned, my name is Taylor Gabler. I love volleyball. I love working with adaptive sport. My business is Anchored Mental Performance. And the reason that I chose Anchored is because in sport, there are a lot of waves. There are a lot of things that happen. And sports psych in our mental game can really anchor us through all of those waves to kind of battle through adversity and go from there. And so to kind of start on creating a common ground for all of us. You guys are coaches. I am a coach as well. And our job as coaches is to assist an athlete in reaching a goal. Whatever that goal might be, it might be one that you help an athlete determine. It might be an athlete goal that they come to you to get assistance with. And so if our job is to help them reach a goal, it is most effective when we do it and we support the whole person while we're doing it. And so if we only see our athletes as the opportunity to really help them grow. And so while it's an coach-athlete relationship, psychology comes in when it's a person-to-person relationship. And so as we frame this conversation, I also want to recognize that I am from a Western culture and not necessarily everyone who's watching is. And so psychology is rooted in culture. And for that reason, I have been really intentional in doing research and making sure that all the information that I share today is going to apply no matter where you are in the world and no matter what culture you're from. So our game plan for today, we're going to start with supporting athlete well-being. And we're going to start there because that's really the foundation. If our athletes are well, we can really help them reach the goals that they have. Then we're going to talk about developing some resilience skills. And then finally, just focus and motivation. The fun part about today is that everything overlaps. There is nothing that operates in isolation, and with mental wellness, with sports psychology, it all kind of overlaps. And so we're going to talk about how all these things tie together. My goal is that you would leave here today with practical skills and resources that you can look at these slides, you can take some notes, and you can go to your teams and say, okay, this is what we're doing, this is how it's going to help you, and that your teams would be elevated, that your athletes would feel well, they would feel respected, and they can get closer to their goals as well. So as I mentioned, we're going to kick off with athlete well-being because it's the foundation. If your athlete is not well, it's really hard to get them to do the things that they need to do from a performance standpoint. If you are unwell, like with an illness, with a physical illness, it's really hard for you to go out and play your best game. It's the same thing with our mental wellness. If we are mentally unwell, it is really difficult, sometimes impossible, to go out onto a court and then perform our best. And so it is our job as coaches not to be the only person who supports our athletes and their well-being, but usually athletes spend a lot of time with us as coaches. They can leave their regular lives and they can come play the sport that we all love. And so if we can support their well-being, they are going to come back, they're going to be more motivated, they're going to be more focused, and we're going to get more out of them, and they're going to get more out of their experience as well. We're going to kick off our conversation with team culture. And the reason that we're going to start with team culture is because if our team is well, then everyone can feel well and everyone can operate in a healthy way. And the fact is that every team has a culture, whether or not you formally recognize it or not. And so the definition of team culture that I'm going to use today is the shared set of values, beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors. So the things that we value, the things that we think, the way that we communicate, and then ultimately how we behave on the court and off the court, that determines the culture that we allow and that we aspire to have on our teams. And when I'm looking at research across the globe of like what helps an athlete's well-being, it is over and over and over again a supportive team culture. And what support looks like in every area, in every pocket of the world might look a little bit different, but you know what support means, and you know how people are going to be supportive. And if you are unsure, and if an athlete tells you that they don't feel supported, this is a conversation that you can have about what would feel most supportive. And so when we're developing team culture, it is important that our team culture is formally recognized, meaning that it's a conversation that you are having with your staff, with other coaches, with the captains on your team, with the entire team, if that makes sense for your organization, about what do we want our team culture to be? What do we want people to come into the gym, feel, and act, and how do we want them to behave and experience this sport for the first time, maybe, or experience over. How we do that is through a culture inventory. And so if you've never sat down and really thought about what kind of culture do I want to create for my athletes? What kind of culture do I want to create for my staff, my organization? I encourage you to take these questions and to sit down with the stakeholders, the athletes, the coaches, however you choose to do that, and really think about what is it that I desire to have, and where are we right now? And then how can we bridge that gap? And so talking through values. Values are the overarching kind of leading principles of how your team acts and interacts. And so ask yourself, like, what would our top 3 team values be? Is it determination? Is it like a family kind of mindset that they would come in and feel like they are supported like a family member? Is it one where people are challenged to be their best? Like, what do you define as your values? And then ask yourself or ask your team, does everyone agree on these values? Because if not, then we have some work to do to make sure that everyone's on the same team and can value the same things. And then ask, how were these values chosen? Is it important for like a coach to just determine these and make sure that everyone's following along? Or in your side of the world, is it more helpful to have a collaborative approach? I know here in the US, athletes usually tend to want a collaborative approach when we're talking about our team values and the things that they want to live out. And then the hard question is, how would other people describe our team? And you can reach out to fellow coaches or friends in this space and ask maybe how they would define us or define you. Or you can kind of guess. And so the goal is that your top 3 values would be the same way that other people define you. And if that is acting in harmony, that you know that you're on the right track to have a supportive and an inclusive culture where everyone can be well and get the things that they need. we try to train our athletes to think or believe about their own capability, about their role on our team, their place on our team, and then also like how they can get to the goals that they set. And so asking, what do we believe about adversity? What is our I guess, motto about adversity? What do we believe about our ability? If our team's always walking on the court like, man, we're going to lose, right? Like that's not usually a supportive team culture. It's one where people are afraid to play, or it's not very helpful to go out and think that you're going to lose. What is every team member's role? And so it's important that people like to know what is expected of them. And so what is everyone's role? Have we formalized that? Do we talk about roles? And then in those roles or leadership roles, what do we expect? And then are those people also following through? So if we expect our leaders to have really good communication skills and they're not, then our belief system can be a little bit off because we're expecting and we're not actually following through, and that can hurt our culture and also hurt our athletes' well-being. Talking about attitudes, similar to belief, but it's more of like the action of how we show up. And so what does it look like when our team is trying to problem solve? How does our team respond to mistakes? What does our attitude look like around that? And then how do we emotionally approach practice? Are people bored? Are people motivated? Are people excited to be there? And if you find that people's attitudes are slightly off from your desired, then we can kind of go back to the drawing board of like, okay, if everyone's pretty stressed when they walk into practice, what is it that we can do to help them feel less stressed so that we can go out and have a great practice? And then finally, our behaviors. What behaviors do you or do you not permit when you're on the court or when you're in hotels or when you're traveling together? How do you reinforce those actions? How are missteps handled? And then finally, how is information communicated throughout your organization? Everyone lives in a different cultural context who's on this call today. And so what works in one place might not work in another place. And also what works on like your men's team might not work on a women's team, or what works for adults might not work for children. And so I encourage you to kind of sit back, kind of think through, what is it that we desire to have here? Do our athletes believe that this is what we're providing to them? And then how can we get a little bit closer to the culture that they have? Because if an athlete knows the culture, they feel safe in that culture, they're going to thrive. But if our culture is always shifting or they don't really know what to expect, then athletes are going to just naturally feel a little bit more uneasy. The waves are going to feel a little bit higher, and they're not going to know really who to turn to when things get difficult. And so I encourage you, again, to just kind of think through all of these things on your own time. When we're talking about the culture that we have, wanted to get into more specific kind of coaching mindsets or coaching philosophies. And so when we're trying to provide emotional support, I can't teach you how to respond emotionally and to support each individual athlete in each individual situation. But what I can give you is kind of broad overviews of ways that you can approach practice in your coaching that is going to be safer and is going to help an athlete feel more supported, and then their emotions will kind of follow suit. So there's two kind of main. Goal orientation is the formal title that we're going to use for these. If you like Google this, goal orientation is the title that you can use, but it's really more of just like the how, the why behind all that you do. And so there's two kind of funnels, performance and mastery. We're going to talk about performance first. And so when we talk about performance goal orientation, and if you come from like a performance philosophy, it comes from like a win at all costs kind of mentality. It's like focus on beating other people or comparing athletes to other people that they're with, or comparing them to other teams that they're trying to compete against. Because of this, it becomes a very externally motivated environment, meaning that they are more motivated by winning and they're more motivated by trophies than them actually improving. And so because of that, if they don't win or they don't succeed at the task in front of them, they feel really bad about themselves, and they then avoid challenges. They avoid feeling like they are a failure. And this is also an environment that values superiority. And while I'm talking through this, no coach is like, oh, that's definitely me. Because when I talk through it like that, it doesn't sound like the best environment. But I think sometimes we do this unintentionally. And so what this sounds like on a kind of day-to-day basis is a coach who only provides feedbacks when an athlete makes a mistake and doesn't also provide feedback when they do something successful. And so if you're only providing feedback on mistakes, an athlete is really just waiting for them to mess up, because that's when they know they're going to get contact with their coach. It's also praising outcomes rather than the process. And so only, praising athletes when they do something successful or they win, or comparing them and be like, wow, you're really better. You're much better than this other person on your team. And while that can feel good in the moment, it also doesn't teach athletes to be better for their own sake. It's like, oh, it feels good to be better than someone else. And that kind of motivation will die out pretty quickly. The performance goal orientation also sees challenges as tests, meaning like you can fail at this, like you're either going to succeed or fail. And that causes performance anxiety to be really high. And then also just discussing performance as an isolated incident, or discussing performance in like one single time stamp. And so it's like your performance has changed over time, or how your performance could improve in the future, even if it was a performance failure. And so what this looks like from behavior from coaches is interacting with high performers more frequently than lower performers. And this is, again, not anything that people usually do on purpose, but I've worked with coaches before and just taken film of practice and kind of shown them, hey, you interact with these athletes way more than these athletes, and it wasn't their intention, but that's creating like a performance kind of environment where people who are lower on the totem pole know that they are, and so they get less contact with coaches. It's also coaches having different body language when winning or losing. They're all cool, calm, collected when they're winning, but then struggling or more angry when they're losing. And so that creates an environment where athletes are unsure of what kind of attitude or what kind of feedback they're going to get from their coach, depending on if they're winning or losing. And so if you know you're going to get yelled at if you're losing, then you feel much more anxious, and it's harder to feel emotionally supported in that kind of environment if your coach's behavior is changing based on if you're winning or losing. And then in practice, doing mostly competitive drills and framing it as competitive drills, praising the people who win, not really talking about the purpose of the drill or framing the process of the drill or what it's working on, and just kind of having an outcome of like, you won, you lost. And if an athlete's consistently losing, that doesn't feel great, and it's not a place where an athlete feels well and emotionally supported. So on the other side, we have mastery, and it's kind of the opposite of performance. It's focused on skill development, that you come in every day and you see your job as a coach to help that athlete get towards their goal. It's an environment where our athletes are going to be way more self-motivated because they know what they're working on. They know that they're going to be supported along the way, and they know what their goal in the task is, but they also know that if they fail at it, they're going to be supported, and that it's an environment that values effort and persistence. And so those are the things that come up in conversation of effort, their persistence, and their continue to try. And it's an environment that embraces challenges. So it's challenges that become something that, yes, it tests their skills, but also is an okay place to try something new and fail and get better at something, rather than just feeling like a failure when they leave. And so this sounds like, from a coach's perspective, a balanced feedback to everyone, and also for mistakes and things that they do well. It praises effort rather than outcomes. And so even if you win a game, you can praise the outcome, but you can also say, like, we got this outcome because of all the effort, because of all of these things, because of our communication, because of all of the small things that we did as a team. And we're praising and reinforcing those things rather than just winning. It sees challenges as opportunities, and it's reminding athletes that their performance is trying to increase over time rather than an isolated incident. And so reminding people of maybe who you've beat now, who you used to not be able to beat, or the way that you the way that they've improved on some of their skills, the way that they've improved on some of their team connectedness and things like that. And it looks like interacting with all of your athletes equally, having really consistent body language during performance, that the athletes know exactly what to expect out of you. Your emotions are in check, because athletes oftentimes will look to coaches to see, like, how am I supposed to see and interpret this experience that I'm having? And then having drills with clear purpose and drills that are aimed at athlete development, not just competition. And so there's a time and a place for both of these things. I don't want it to seem like performance is never allowed, because there's definitely times when we are going and we're getting tested. We are, trying to beat another team. But when we're practicing with the environment, are going to feel more supported overall. And so the key kind of concept that we wanted to touch on today is performance anxiety. And having a mastery orientation is going to help offset a lot of those things, because it is focused on improvement rather than just winning or just being successful. And when we're talking about performance anxiety, I think it's extremely important to note that it is necessary and it is needed for our athletes to play at the highest level, or for them to improve on their skills. And so if you look at the right side of our screen, we have this inverted U. And what it shows us is that for us to have peak performance, we actually need moderate levels of pressure or moderate levels of nervousness to play our best. So the reason that this is because if you have no nervousness, or you don't care about this a situation that you're engaged in, you're not going to try, you're not going to prepare, you're not going to practice. If you've ever had a team that like plays really bad when they're playing a team that they know they're going to beat, that's kind of this situation, because they just think that they're going to walk onto the court and win. There's not a whole lot of pressure, and so they play poorly. Or if there's like extreme amounts of pressure, they think there's no way that we're going to win. There are certain people coming to watch them, and they feel really, really nervous. Their body can't prime themselves to play their best. And so if an athlete, you notice that they're having performance anxiety, or they come to you talking about their nervousness, the number one thing that I would recommend that you do is to say, yes, you need this to be your best, and to remind them that this nervousness that they feel is a part of the sport, just like anything else. And as soon as we tell an athlete, like, yes, you're supposed to be nervous, this is normal, then our athletes can take a break and say, okay, like, I'm not losing my mind. How do we keep our nervousness or our anxiousness in this sweet spot in the middle, so that we can use our skills to keep our athletes in that middle of the curve? And that's what we're going to spend the rest of our time talking about today. So we've talked about athlete well-being, and if our athletes feel well because they have a supportive team culture, there's a mastery orientation when coaches engaging in practice, and they know that it's okay to not, like, it's okay to be nervous, then we can build in resilient skills. And so I like to categorize these in thoughts, feelings, and actions. These things intermingle, and so our thoughts affect our feelings or our emotions affect our thoughts, and then our actions are thrown in there. Of how we feel is how we act, and so all of these things are overlapped. But if we're talking to an athlete and they're struggling in a certain area, wanted to give you some skills that you can practice in all three of these environments. And so the first thing is thoughts. So if an athlete is struggling with having low confidence, or struggling just with their self-talk, I think the common thing, if you don't know anything about psychology, is to say, well, just talk positively to yourself. And there is nothing wrong with some positive self-talk. But as we all know, sometimes it feels like a lie. Like, I cannot just self-talk myself out of my emotions, because they're real, they're salient, and they are present in my body. And so if I'm feeling really nervous, or I am really afraid to mess up, and I just say, it's going to be okay, we know that we're lying, and our body knows it too. And it's hard for us to actually get us to lower that pressure, lower that anxiety into that sweet spot. And so I tell our athletes that functional self-talk is more important than positive self-talk. And functional self-talk is self-talk that says the what you want to do and how you want to do it. And so if our athletes are really nervous about an upcoming match, and an athlete will say, well, you know, I want to win. And then I would challenge them, go that more to like a mastery rather than performance of like, okay, what does it take to win? And they're going to say, I want to be consistent with my serves. I want to do this. I want to do that. And then how we're going to do it, I'm going to do it by, and kind of filling in the blank. That is functional self-talk because it tells us what we're going to do rather than what we're afraid of. And so kind of reframing it in our mind. Following that is the even if. And so oftentimes our brain is like, well, what if I mess up? What if I miss this serve? What if I feel like a failure? What if people laugh at me? And so I like to reframe those thoughts with functional self-talk of, okay, even if that happens, I will blank. So even if I mess up, I will, you know, continue to work on my skills so that I can improve. Even if someone laughs at me, I know that I'm supported by, you know, a parent, a coach, someone else, and that they will never laugh at me. Even if we lose this game, I will be okay, and we will continue to get better. And then finally, with our thoughts, interpreting stress as an opportunity rather than a threat. And so what nervousness is our body saying, oh my gosh, there's a threat. And if we can reframe that to say, okay, yes, there is a test, but there's also an opportunity, then our feelings are going to change, our bodily sensations are going to change, and our actions are going to be a little bit different too. So if we have a really big match coming up and we say, oh my gosh, you know, the threat is we could lose, but the opportunity is, you know, we are getting to test our skills and see where we're at. The opportunity is we could also win. And so making sure that we're interpreting that stress as something that is facilitative to performance and also an opportunity for us to test our skills and to go show all the things that we've been. Our feelings have physical sensations. And so if you think about if you've ever been nervous or you've ever come up against a challenge or something that you need to be resilient with, you often have an increased heart rate, you'll feel nervous or jittery, your brain's not really functioning. And so everything's kind of a perfect storm to make you not perform your best. And so I want to teach you 3 skills to kind of help anchor our body with those nervous feelings that we have. The first one is our breathing techniques. And I know that we all know how to breathe because we do it to keep ourselves alive. But oftentimes I find that people aren't taught how to breathe for relaxation, breathe for functioning, for helping our bodies calm down. And so if you place your hand on your chest and your stomach, and when you're usually just like kind of hanging out, relaxing, we're breathing with just the top half of our lungs into our chest. And that top hand is kind of like raising and lowering. When we get under stress, we're taking very shallow breaths. And so it might be happening at a slower pace. And so when we're teaching our athletes how to breathe, or we're trying to get them to calm down, I encourage them to put that hand on their stomach and breathe all the way into their stomach, which sends signals. When we can breathe all the way down and expand our diaphragm, it sends signals to our brain that says we're safe, we're okay, and we can do what is being asked of us. And so the double inhale with a really long exhale is my favorite breathing techniques to teach. So it's 2 inhales and then a really long exhale lasting probably 6 or 7 seconds. And it just takes us, it kind of takes the edge off. And I'll walk through our athletes doing that, 5-6 times in a row, just to kind of reset and try and decrease the heart rate and all of the other things that are going along with feeling nervous. The second is progressive muscle relaxation. And this is another thing that you can kind of like type into Google and they'll pull up some imagery skills or imagery videos for you guys to follow. And it cycles between tensing and relaxing our muscles. And so when we know that we're stressed, we tense up, whether we are physically doing it on purpose or if we're just holding tenseness in our shoulders or our legs. we are just operating at a more tense space, and it's hard to play sports and be really effective with that when we're feeling really tense. And so progressive muscle relaxation, what it does is it overrides the body's natural like tenseness, and it says, okay, I'm going to show my body that I can be more tense, and then couples it with relaxation. And so if you would do it with me, we're going to do 2 body groups. And so what I want you to do is to take your right leg, and I want you to straighten it at the knee if you are able to. If you are not, you can pick another major muscle group. You can do like a bicep, or you can maybe do your jaw. But I want you to kind of flex it and tense it as much as you can. So if it's a leg, the top of the leg should be burning. If it's a bicep, kind of like flexing and making sure your bicep is as tense as possible. We're going to hold it for 10-15 seconds, and then we're going to relax. The goal is not to like get a cramp or anything, but to feel that heat and then relax. And so after you relax on that one side, I just want you to take a second to kind of compare both sides. The part that was just tense probably feels a little bit more tingly, a little bit more warm. It might feel a little bit
Hi, Taylor. Just checking in. I think you might have muted your microphone, and the last thing I heard from you was you might get a little bit warm. I don't know if that's the same for everyone, but just checking in.
sorry. So was it the I said you might get a little bit warm on the one leg. And so I'm so sorry for that. You might get warm on that one leg if you're tensing it. And then as you relax it into your chair, you might feel heavy, warm, tingly. And then what you can do is you can do the other side. You can tense it up, you can make it feel nice and warm, and then just compare the feeling in your legs or your arm or whatever body part you chose compared to the rest of your body. And most likely it is feeling relaxed, it is feeling more loose, it is feeling more, I don't know, tingly is a word that like usually helps define it for me. But it also ushers in chemicals to our brain that says, okay, we are allowed to relax in this stressful situation. And so with athletes who are feeling anxious or they're feeling nervous or they're feeling tense, I will walk them through, or I encourage you to walk them through maybe a couple muscle groups, maybe their core, their shoulders, their biceps, whatever it is, to kind of just usher in a sense of calm, usher in a sense of relaxation before they go and do whatever it is that they're feeling nervous about. And then the final skill is engaging in our 5 senses. And so when we feel nervous, we basically turn off the front part of our brain that helps us with decision making. And so if we can create an environment or make our brain focus on our senses, then we are kind of let's relax. Let's engage in the environment. The environment is not scary, and we can go. And so I always give the example of if you were being chased by a tiger, you wouldn't be thinking like, what color are the trees? And what's the temperature of my body? And how am I breathing right now? You would just be going. And so in the same sense that if we're trying to relax and we're not actually being chased by a tiger, if we can slow down to use our breath, to relax our muscles and engage in the 5 senses, then we're communicating with our brain, hey, we are allowed to be relaxed in this environment. And so oftentimes, like in times where you're walking into the gym for the first time, or a match is about to start, or someone is feeling really frustrated walking into the gym, we'll just kind of talk through of what are things that you can see that you didn't notice before. what are the colors of the wall? What do you notice about the court? Are there any imperfections in the court? What can you smell in this space? Sometimes it's unpleasant, but sometimes it's pleasant. If they have like a Gatorade or a drink with them, they can smell that. What are things that you can taste, or what are things that you enjoy eating to kind of reset? And then, walking through the senses. So hear, what do you hear? And then what can you touch that makes you feel grounded? So maybe it's putting your hands on the ground. Maybe it's holding the volleyball. Maybe it's, putting their hand on their heart, because that's what makes them feel safe and secure. And so walking them through that to say, you are allowed to be calm in this space. And then finally, talking through actions. What are the routines that we create before people serve, before you show up to the court, like our practice, our warm-up routines? What do we do like before, after dinner? What are the routines for traveling? And trying to create some consistency in all of those can provide a sense of calm, knowing what to expect, and also can help our athletes be more resilient, because if they know no matter what, I'm doing this routine when I go back to serve. And then communication is always an action. And so if someone is really stuck in their own thoughts, they're struggling with their emotions, I will encourage athletes, or I encourage you to encourage athletes to speak to other people the way that they need to be spoken to. And so to encourage others, to make sure that other people feel like they can be resilient, or to talk to other people about how great they are at the skill that they're trying to do, or our capability, that can oftentimes help snap athletes out of it as well, because their focus is then on other people rather than the inner experience that they're having that is really difficult. We're going to wrap up our conversation with focus and motivation. And on the right, you'll see that it says intensity and direction. And the reason that those are two most important words for focus and motivation is because no matter what, we always have focus. It's just depending on where it's like pointed at and how intensely we feel it. And so oftentimes our athletes will look like they're not focused on practice, and they will be extremely focused on maybe what's for dinner tonight. And so it's like they're focused, but they're not in practice, or they're really motivated for something, but it's just not in the time period that we are. And so our goal as coaches is just to make sure that their focus and their motivation is focused on the right things at the right time. Another example is if an athlete is working on a skill and they're really working on their form, and yet they're in a competition or they're in a game and they're focusing on their form rather than reading the defense. And so they have great form, but they're setting the ball to the wrong place over and over and over again because they're setting into double blocks or something. It's great focus, but just in the wrong direction. And so it's helpful for us to kind of help point and direct that for them. And the number one skill that I teach for this is mindfulness. And the definition of mindfulness is paying attention to the current moment on purpose, without judgment. And the without judgment is the really, really hard part. If we can help athletes be right here, right now, they will know what they're trying to do, and they will also feel motivated to do it. And so when we're thinking about mindfulness, oftentimes our brain is outside of our body, thinking about what just happened or what is to come. And anytime we can anchor our athletes back in the present moment, we have a better opportunity for them to be successful at what we're trying to do. And they're going to feel more motivated because they're in the moment with that experience. And so 4 kind of like skills that I wanted to teach as we wrap up is first is it's called Leaves on a Stream. It's another thing that you can search and you can find imagery scripts for, like YouTube videos for. And the idea of Leaves on a Stream, it's the idea that no matter what comes up in a person's brain, we allow it to pass without judging it. And so the action is imagining sitting by a stream and seeing leaves float by and putting every thought that we have on that leaf and letting it float by out of sight without judging or interacting with that thought. And so when I do this outside of the court, it'll often be like, what is this about? I'm bored. And I'm like, yep, just put it on the leaf and watch it go by. But in practice, once we can get really good at these things, in practice or in a game, we can imagine like a mistake and our thought or our judgment about a mistake on a leaf and watch it go by, or we can frame it into different things, such as like seeing clouds go by, or a volleyball rolling by, or seeing something written on a whiteboard and wiping it off, so that we are then allowing that thought to usher past, and we are now present with our new thought, with our new experience. And so that's an excellent tool that you can use pre-practice to teach athletes how to be present and non-judgmental with the things that they're thinking. The flush it kind of mentality, with the leaves on a stream, or being present or overcoming kind of adversity. There's a lot of teams will use like flush it like a toilet. Things have been, like I said, erasing the whiteboard, or like squishing, or like throwing something away, or something of that sort. And you can kind of create a team mantra of like, we are taking that experience, we're letting it go, and we're moving on, and we're going to be right here, right now. For athletes who struggle with focusing on outside things that are outside of the volleyball environment, I will have athletes come in, and before they step on the court, do a brain dump, or before we go to a major event, do what I call a brain dump. And it's taking a minute and writing down everything that's on their mind, whether it be, upcoming homework assignments, or their job, or their career, or what they're nervous about for the upcoming game. We're writing it all down on a piece of paper, giving them a minute, and they're just furiously like scribbling away. And then we take that and we say, you're going to come back to all of these thoughts afterwards. But we're going to now have a clear mind as we step into this practice or this game, and we can then tell them what we want to focus on, and we can feel more motivated to do that because there's not other things that we're worried about. And then finally, I said it with practices earlier, but the what and the why of what you're doing. And athletes, again, needed some direction sometimes of what am I supposed to be focusing on? Because, ultimately, the ball is supposed to land on the other side's court so that they can get a point. But if you're in practice of really communicating what you're trying to accomplish with this drill and why you're doing it, it can really help hone in the focus and motivation for the athletes that you're working with. So as we wrap up today, some kind of final thoughts I wanted to leave you with. Number one, formally discussing your culture really matters, of making sure that your athletes know what is expected of them, and making sure that the culture that your environment creates is one that they want to be in and one that they find supportive. Number two is that we can plan mental skills into practice plans. We can do the things that I had taught you on those last two slides. We can make that up. Athlete will come to you and say, how can I improve my serve? They might be less likely to be like, how can I deal with my performance anxiety? But these are skills that you guys can teach them as coaches. And then finally, the more present we are, the more focused and motivated that our athletes can be, because they're less other things that they're having to worry about. And it is our job to focus them on right here, right now, and in the direction that we would like their focus to be. Wanted to say thanks for attending today, and wanted to open the conversation to any questions that you might have.
Oh, Taylor, thank you so much. That was absolutely wonderful. Thank you for just sharing so much, really. I found myself having loads and loads of questions, and then it felt as though you answered them almost immediately afterwards with the next point. But I'm not going to let that stop me asking some. Those of you who've joined us before, I can see lots of familiar names and faces. You know the deal now. If you've got a question, just raise your hand and we will come to you. And if you can't speak, because I know there are a few of you that are unable to, then just type it in the chat box and I'll ask Taylor on your behalf. But if you don't mind, Taylor, then I'll kick things off. Sitting volleyball is a sport where tournaments are often played in clusters, and you might have multiple games per day, or if it's in the Paralympics or major championships, multiple really important games over multiple days. So maybe 2 games in 2 days, etc., etc. How would you go about either wiping the slate clean for a new game and a new day, or getting over a loss that might have happened a number of hours ago? Or would you encourage the athletes to kind of build on the momentum of the tournament?
Yeah, It's a great question, and it's a hard thing to do because it's like we just were successful, or we were just to have some sort of recap of every game, to have a conversation about what just happened, and then process that, talk about what went well, what we need to work on, kind of frame of how we're going to carry what we learned from that experience and into the new environment, and being really mindful about when we step onto the court the next time, this is a new experience. What happened, and what is going to be, we don't know yet. And so we can be in the present moment without the judgments from the previous experience and only carrying with the things that we learned, then we have a greater ability to be successful in that next endeavor, and we're learning and we're getting better.
Lovely. We haven't had any hands raised yet. Oh, and sorry, I think there were a couple of you where the sound was an issue. Apologies for that. I think that'll be sorted if you want to watch this back retrospectively. But all is good. Hopefully you can all see and hear us very clearly now. What about external factors then? Because a lot of the time in adaptive sport, the players aren't full-time athletes, so there'll be a lot of things that are going on around their lives, as you mentioned before. Some might have school, some might have family, some might be feeling up, some might be feeling down. So how can coaches help athletes separate what's all of the external noise and kind of focus on being a great team member, being a great player, and being focused in that moment, which is so important?
Yeah. It's, again, really difficult to do because life is life, and we as coaches don't have control over everything else that is happening. But if you recognize, like if you know that someone is struggling in a certain way, or someone says, this is really happening outside, I'm feeling really stressed about a test, or, a grandparent is passing away or something like that. If you take the moment to just recognize how difficult that is, to say, that is so hard. I'm really glad that you're here. How can we create this environment today? And also, like we talked about, having a consistent culture of no matter what happens outside, if an athlete knows that they can come to our space and they know what to expect, they know that people are going to be happy, they know that people are going to cheer them on, then that can also offset a lot of the difficulties that they're experiencing externally, because then volleyball can become a safe space. So, in summary, recognizing that those are really difficult things, allowing you to be a person they can kind of talk to some of those things about, and also like talking to them about, this is a space where we can continue to work on you in a world where there's a lot of uncontrollable things.
Lovely, thank you. Agnes, your hand is up. I was hoping it would be. Unmute your microphone. What's your question?
How are you all?
We're all good here, Agnes. Fire away.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Taylor, for all those that you have taught us about sports psychology. Especially, let me say, in your country, you are better off with this sports psychology. But in our country, let me say, these African countries, we have problem with that sports psychology, because you can get that there are some the players who are coming, they should be taken through the session of sports psychology about their mind, about their place. The place can also affect them, where they are coming from, the environment. Maybe as Mr. Moha has asked about the place, person coming from home, there is no maybe food, transport from where she's coming from. She's a mother. So this sports psychology is good for them to be taken through. Maybe when they have the session, a player, your best player can come. And when she's playing for the competition, she's not performing. You ask, what is the problem? She's just keeping quiet. She's not open to you as a coach. She's not telling you what is happening. But later on is when you have finished the competition, is later on she will have to tell you that, coach, me when I came, I did not maybe have food in my house. I left my children that way. So when I was playing, I was not concentrating. So I think some of us like coaches, we should have that course of sports psychology so that we can be also taking them through. Because if I have knowledge and skills about sports psychology, it will be easy for me, coach. I'll be taking maybe a 1 day session to take them through about the psychology, the mental, how to play, so that they can be also, when they come for practice, at least they have knowledge and knowledge about psychology in sports. So maybe we can, some of us, if we get that course of sports psychology, it will be very important to our players in African countries, because in African countries, we don't have that course of, you just take players, they play, they finish, they go. You don't take them because you doesn't have that knowledge and skills about sports psychology. But whatever that I've learned from there is very, really good, that I'll have also to try to my team about their emotion, about their performance anxiety. You see, I've learned a lot about it. But to me, I request, if I'll have that course of sports psychology, it will be very good and very important to me as a ParaVolley coach. Thank you so much.
To highlight something that you were mentioning of, a lot of times our athletes aren't going to be open with us in the way and tell us that we're struggling. And so sports psychology does not have to be a formal thing. And so having like coaching education about sports psychology is so great, because like you said, you can weave it into your practice, you can weave it into the conversations that you're having, and the athletes are never know that they're actually learning sports psychology. Some people can be completely turned off to the idea of mental skills or sports psychology. But if you say, hey, we're all going to do a breathing technique, this is something that is important, we're doing it, we're teaching them the skills of how to like regulate their system without giving it a formal name. And if you create a culture and you create an environment that is safe, they might not be able to have that conversation before, but maybe after, you wish it was before, but they eventually are going to come to you and have those conversations, and then we can deal with it at that time. And so as much as we would like it to, sports psychology is just like any other skill. We're not going to teach them to serve and expect them to be perfect at it the first time. But if we continually chip at it over time, you're going to create an environment where an athlete is going to be more successful and feel more open to the idea of sports psychology and mental skills.
Thank you.
Thank you, Agnes. Great to hear from you. Thank you, Taylor, as well. Just picking up on that point, is there a way that, not necessarily for the people who are not receptive to it, or who might be a little bit skeptical, so the breathing exercises and some of the physical things that you talked about, do you think that it's something that coaches could perhaps introduce to warm-ups or team meetings or environments where it's not obvious that you're doing something that is sports psychology related, so it just sort of becomes part of the methods of what you do as a team?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would encourage it. And so there are so many different ways that you can. So if you make it a part of your routine to do some sort of mindful activity before every practice or before every team meeting, then it just becomes the norm. If an athlete chooses not to engage in it, that is their choice. But over time, if it's just like the normal thing to do, then we would hope that over time that they would do it. But like, I would really encourage you to consider, like, where does sports psychology and some of these skills fit in to our regular routines, and how can we just make it the same as any other part of our warm up as we get started with practice or a game or something like that.
Amazing. Right then, I think we should try and round this up on the hour, which gives us 6 more minutes. And there are some people in here that usually love to ask a question. Robin DeHaan, you are worryingly quiet. We've not heard from you yet, so do feel free to get stuck in. Remember, just raise your hands and we will come to you. they're shy today, Taylor, but I think it's just because you were so thorough in your presentation. Hopefully everyone's going to be taking away some brilliant things to take to their teams, to take to their experience, to take to their broader lives, to be honest.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to come in with another one then, whilst we wait for some people to put their hands up. How can coaches sort of quantify process? Because right at the beginning, you talked about, you know, some teams put all their value on winning and losing. So what are some ways that coaches can sort of offer that feedback without it being as obvious as you did this badly? Is it more about setting the objectives as opposed to pointing out the ills or the mistakes?
Yeah. So when we think about the process, it's the question of how do we get to the outcome? So if the outcome that you want is more consistent serving, then, and you notice that the problem is maybe something in their form, then the process goal, 8 out of the next 10 serves, I want you to make sure that you're focusing on this movement, and then really highlighting, okay, like, we're working on the movement, not necessarily where the ball lands, and breaking it down. And once we get the movement down, then we can build up into where does the ball land. Or if it's like a team kind of process, we're trying to win games always. How is it that we're going to go about doing that? Is it highlighting our defensive effort? Is it being in position most of the time? Is it our effort or making sure that we're going for every ball? And so really kind of questioning yourself of what is it that we need to do in order to get the outcome, and then highlighting those things. And so it's like, hey, we were in the right position on that defensive effort, you know, like sometimes we just lose points. And so we're highlighting that we did the right thing that is going to help us have successful defensive effort most of the time, even if we don't win that point. And so kind of breaking down the what and the how of the outcome that we want.
Lovely, thank you. This question has come in privately, and I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure what it means. So I'm going to leave it up to you, because you definitely will. How can a coach ensure a good balance between developing athletes' intrinsic motivation with extrinsic motivation in athletes? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does.
Good. Okay.
Yeah. So intrinsic motivation is doing something for the sake of your own enjoyment. And so if someone's playing volleyball, intrinsic motivation is because they enjoy improving. They enjoy the sport. Extrinsic motivation is I enjoy winning. I enjoy the money that I make from doing this, which isn't usually the case. But like I enjoy the recognition. I enjoy, you know, our nation kind of supporting us. And so both of those things are necessary, because if no one ever cared about the balance that I'm going to talk about today, because this is a very long and interesting answer, but the balance of the intrinsic motivation is making sure that you understand why they are there, and then like highlighting that for them. Because and if someone says, I'm here to win, like really challenging that of like, what is your purpose of being here? What do you get out of it? And making sure that you're not reinforcing the outcomes, that you're not reinforcing the extrinsic motivation. So if, you know, you show up to practice and you're like, hey, like, we're here to win, or hey, we're here to like beat the person across the net, then you're reinforcing the extrinsic motivation. But if you show up to practice or you show up to a game saying, hey, we're here because we love volleyball, we're here because we have a great community and we can make friends doing this, we're here because we really enjoy the challenge of doing that, then we are just reinforcing the intrinsic motivation and making that stronger for our athletes to be like, oh yeah, that's why I'm here, not just to win games or to feel superior to someone else.
Awesome. Awesome. Right, we've had a couple of questions in the chat box from Roya. So number one, are there any specific psychological techniques tailored for athletes with disabilities compared to able-bodied athletes? Which is such a good question. Thank you, Roya.
Yeah. It's a hard question. And generally, I would say that able-bodied athletes' mental skills are similar to athletes who have impairments or different things that they're facing. And so the way that I think about it is, so I used to work with blind and visually disabled people. And so when we think about imagery in that sense, I wouldn't, talk about, what do you see, because they don't have the mental image of that because they are blind. And so I would talk more about the physical sensations, what they hear in their sport rather than what they see. And the same thing with athletes don't have feet, they don't have lower limbs, they're missing hands and things like that. And so as I talk through progressive muscle relaxation, we have to just be a little bit more open about the way that we're describing things. So if you say flex your calf, and our athletes don't have calves, they don't know what they're doing, or they don't have a muscle to flex. And so we can say, flex the lowest part of your body, and then everyone can kind of funnel in and experience and know what they're supposed to be doing during that time. Sometimes we're dealing with cognitive disabilities or cognitive impairments, and that uses some specific, and that's an individualized based sports psychology, but kind of like, if you know what their impairment is, just making sure that we're working in conjunction with that. So, if an athlete can't read because of some sort of like brain injury, making sure that we're making our sports psychology still accessible to them.
Fabulous. And then the second question, you've already answered the first part, but I'll read the whole thing. What are some practical ways to incorporate sports psychology principles into regular training sessions? And then the second part, how can we teach young or inexperienced athletes to stay focused and manage their anxiety during matches?
Yeah, it's a difficult thing to do, especially for younger people, because we were all young once, and we know how difficult it is just to exist when we're young. But when we're teaching young and inexperienced athletes, it's important for us to really tell them what to focus on, because if you think about a volleyball game, there are so many inputs that are coming in. There's the defense, there's like how everyone's moving on our side of the court, there's the speed of the ball, there's outside factors of the lights and the sound. And so if we can point them into a direction of staying focused, that's important. But it's also important to know, again, and so if we have an athlete who's there just because their parent makes them, it's going to be harder for them to focus because someone else is making them come. But if we can really help understand or get to know why they're there, or like what they're trying to get out of it, then we can reinforce that, and we can help them feel more focused as a second hand. Even though they might not want to be there, they can eventually learn that they can get something out of this experience.
Lovely. And as is always the case, Taylor, we've gone beyond the hour. Thank you so much for your time. I will leave you to have the last word. But before that, I would just like to thank you again. That has been absolutely magnificent. And everybody else, wherever you've been watching around the world, whatever time it is, thank you very much for joining us. If you know someone who would benefit from this, it has been recorded, so will be available in perpetuity with all of the other resources that are available as part of your World ParaVolley package. That is 4 webinars down. We've got 1 to go next week at the same time on coach performance modeling. We really are going through all of the facets of what it takes to run and be a brilliant coach, and to hopefully arm you with the tools that you need to be brilliant at what you do and where you do it. So Taylor, thank you again. The last word is yours.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you guys for coming. Thank you for caring about sports psychology and thinking about how you might be able to improve the lives of the people that you work with. My email is on there. I am happy to answer any other questions that you have. And if I ever run into you at an international event with Team USA, I hope that you come up, and I hope that I can meet you in person. Thanks again for your time.